Hello, financiers, bankers, industrialists, and most of the political leaders that count will be in the small Swiss town of Davos in the Alps over the next few days to discuss global economic trends and, of course, our economic future. As South Africans, we want to know how this is going to affect us. To discuss it with us today is Paolo Senatore, the Chief Investment Officer for Ashburton Investments South African Single Manager Funds. Paolo, hello.
Hello.
What for you are going to be the main issues that are going to be discussed at Davos that are going to affect our economy? What as South Africans should we really be looking at to come out of Davos?
So I think from a South African perspective, there's probably two drivers that are immensely important. One has a longer term nature to it, and one is of a shorter term nature. And the shorter term nature is how does the world, because South Africa needs to leverage off global growth, how does the world move from super stimulus growth into what is natural growth? And it's important from a South African perspective that that transition can occur. South Africa growing at below its ability, its long-term growth rates at the moment, needs to leverage at the moment into a global growth scenario. So that becomes an exceptionally important point. The other side, of course, which is important from a longer-term perspective, and they talk of a world of 9 billion people, but Africa and Africa's growth in terms of population and a consumer middle class that starts to come out of that. And importantly for South Africa, because of its proximity to Africa, is how can it leverage off population growth and specifically the dynamics that that'll represent in the African context.
One of the big discussions over the last few weeks has been what people call tapering, the idea that the money that's being pumped through the international finance system by the US Fed is going to slow down. And that's going to have a big impact on us. You're talking in a way about the impact that that will have. What is your prediction for how big an impact tapering would have on our economy?
So tapering may well have an effect on the economy depending on what that does to the global growth rates and those, for example, of the USA. We think, of course, that'll be managed to manage that growth rate accordingly. The difficulty in this scenario that's playing out at the moment is you have a global recovery but in absence of a strong commodity cycle. So that South Africa typically would rely in a global growth scenario of a commodity cycle behind it. And that's not necessarily the case this time. As with other BRIC nations, for example, Russia or Brazil too would depend on a commodity cycle that is very strong. So there's a bit of an absence of this and makes the dynamics a little bit more difficult this time for South Africa to leverage. So within the BRICS, there's collaboration, of course, but there's maybe also a competitiveness in terms of how do we compete for our share of growth to ensure our own South African growth rate picks up a notch.
You talk about the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. Do you think the idea of the BRIC nations is as strong as it was a couple of years ago? I mean, do we all still face these nations? Do we all still face the same economic challenges in 2014?
I think we all face similar challenges. We certainly, as BRICS, as a grouping, are growing at less than pre-crisis levels, so we're all at lower paces. A lot of it's got to do with debt levels, twin deficits for budget deficit, current account deficits, for example. So they're running those deficit and debt issues. And that is not allowing them to get their full potential of growth out. And that's why I stress the importance of BRICS and the reliance on BRICS into global growth scenario and the leveraging that they need to get into the global growth. So therefore the importance of that global growth rate to those nations as a whole.
South Africa is sending a large delegation to Davos. We like to take part in international forums. Some countries, some of the BRIC nations, don't have necessarily the same habit. One doesn't really see Vladimir Putin, I think, at these forums as often. Do you find the BRIC nations are as interested in these forums as other countries, say the United States and Britain are? Do they take them as seriously?
I think they do take them as seriously. Once again, I stress the importance that they look at various economic models and what is necessary at this point in time, because some of the drivers in a typical growth momentum will not be there this time. For example, a strong commodity cycle. So what type of economic models are required to taper into or tap into this type of growth rate story? So I think definitely yes. It'll also highlight various conversation points that they need to bring home, and as BRICS, as a conglomerate, need to discuss and plan out.
Paolo Senatore, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.